Let's go back and look at the Ukrainian front, the attack in Kursk, the invasion of Kursk. Zelensky was saying that this was the first phase of a very successful four-phase peace plan. And I'm going to present it to Biden for September. And since Biden is going to leave, he better pass it on to Harris and Trump. Kursk is a very, very successful first phase, and we will reestablish this peace instrument before October. Putin was saying that he would have to. In other words, as you call it, in social media terms, we have come to the point of whether Putin knows about it. Putin has said that the invasion of Kursk, the current operation, as they call it, for the invasion of Ukraine, paved the way for us. He evaluates it as useful for us, paving the way for us. He said that Ukraine, which wants to destabilize Russia, has not succeeded. He says we are moving forward in Donbass. Let's look back at Ukraine.
The enemy has not succeeded in anything.
Speaking at the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Russian President Vladimir Putin referred to the first invasion of Russian territory since the Second World War. He said that Ukraine aimed to slow the advance of Russian forces in the Donbass by occupying Kursk, but failed to do so. The enemy is suffering huge losses, he said.
Our armed forces stabilized the situation and began to push them out of our borders. Most importantly, there has been no slowdown in our advance. On the contrary, the enemy has weakened itself on key axes, and our forces have stepped up offensive operations.
Putin also mentioned the possibility of peace negotiations with Ukraine. He said that the agreements reached in Istanbul in 2022 should be the basis for negotiations. However, he said that Kiev, at the instigation of Western countries, especially Britain, had rejected the Istanbul agreements. Nevertheless, he gave a conditional green light to sit at the table.
Are we ready to negotiate with them? We have never rejected it, but not on the basis of ad hoc demands. We negotiate on the basis of the documents that were agreed in Istanbul and that have been honored.
The Russian president said that China, Brazil and India could be mediators in the peace talks. Energy policy was also on his agenda. He said that if Ukraine does not extend the agreement on the delivery of Russian gas to Europe, they will consider other options. Shipments would go through other routes, in particular through the Turkish Stream, he said. Putin also spoke about the August prisoner swap between Russia and the United States, which took place in Ankara in coordination with the rally. He thanked Saudi Crown Prince Salman and President Erdogan for offering Turkey as a platform.
The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia took an active role in this work. We are grateful to him for that. And the President of Turkey, Mr. Erdogan, provided Turkey as a platform to finally resolve these issues.
The biggest exchange operation between the US and Russia after the Cold War took place. 26 prisoners from 7 countries were exchanged under the coordination of the MIT.
Mr. Poyraz, let's start with you. Now, in this situation, are we at the point that he fell into the well he dug himself? I mean, because some military experts also say that this is a success after all. Against a gigantic Russia, whether it has occupied or not, it has occupied its land, and this can turn into a trump card. Do you think so? Do you think Putin's comments right now are, in a sense, to gain the psychological upper hand? Because there is still the Ukrainian army in Kursk, and he hasn't been able to throw it out of there, but he says it doesn't matter. He is traveling from capital to capital, and it is even rumored that his next stop will be Ankara. It was very clear in his speech here that I was ready in Istanbul, in the Istanbul agreement. But he gave up in order to fight me and destroy me, but they will come and sit down again. He says they will accept me on my terms. This is it an element of psychological warfare, or has his hand become stronger? Is Putin telling the truth?
Now, I have already stated in our first day's broadcasts that the offensive in Kurdistan has a political goal, a political attack, and that it does not correspond to a military reality. I mean, it is a small territory, but Ukraine has somehow captured a piece of Russian territory, As I said, the offensive has stopped here. I mean, after it stops, it cools down and turns into a Russian counteroffensive, so it could not advance. This is extremely important, and winter is coming. Of course, we called Russia a war of attrition to seize 4 regions. From the beginning, I was the one who said that Russia had fallen into a quagmire. But then Russia recovered, and somehow there is already a difference of forces in this war. Even though the whole West is against it, Russia has somehow annexed that region to its territory. But Ukraine also needs an honorable exit. From the very beginning, Mr. Irma, the world political history is already full of British-Russian showdowns. We all know it. Therefore, it is not surprising that the UK, Boris Johnson, did not bring peace to Ukraine, especially in the negotiations in Istanbul, because the West wants Russia to be worn out here. Putin has also continued to wear out, but now he is also looking for a way out, because in other areas, look, something is happening in the Middle East. He can only give Iran S-4 or something like that. So today, that if it were not for the war with Ukraine, would Putin's hand be idle during such a massive buildup in Cyprus or the Republic of Cyprus region? He would also send something to Tartus. In other words, he would at least increase his power in the Mediterranean. So there is a war of attrition that is currently tying his hands, and of course there is also an economic dimension. In other words, Ukraine is losing between 1,000 and 2,000 soldiers a day, recruiting those who are 40 and 50 years old, which is the age when they can fight, but it is obvious that there is a great loss of soldiers. So I think Ukraine is now closer to peace than Russia. Propaganda work? Yes. Russia is doing this by visiting selected countries and accumulating its own allies in selected regions. And it made these trips despite the Kurz attack there. Plus, I am expressing a salami slice tactic. If there was a slice that those sanctions were nothing during his visit to Mongolia, tomorrow he will say that maybe he will come to Ankara. You see, he will say that if he had first come to Ankara, he would not have been able to express this easily. But now, after his visit to Mongolia, let's say he went to South Africa, they invited him after the summit in Kazan. Therefore, he is now demonstrating to the world public opinion that the Western sanctions are ineffective. But peace, winter is coming. How long can Ukraine hold on? This time, the West has always kept Ukraine there with weapons, incentives, or things. But now Zelensky's cabinet has resigned completely, which is very important in a war, especially Kureva, the foreign minister who was in charge of these negotiations, has resigned. Therefore, I think that Zelensky will now be sent to the West after this U.S. election.